There's a rumor out there that the New York Mets are the favorites to land top free agent starting pitcher Framber Valdez.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On today's show, we got a rumor to discuss, or a couple of them. In the first segment, we'll talk about the report that was out that the Mets are the favorites to land Framber Valdez. I'll go through where that report comes from, if we should buy into it, and if Framber is a good fit for the Mets. Second segment, we're going to talk about what is a fair contract for Framber, how far should the Mets be willing to go. Then in the final segment, we'll talk about a rumor about the Brewers, who apparently are fretting over payroll, which could open the door for a team to trade for their ace, Freddy Peralta. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast on the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. So typically, I would not do an entire show centered around a report by Hector Gomez. No shots fired at Hector Gomez. He actually follows me on Twitter. I follow him as well, because you never know. Sometimes Hector Gomez does have reports. Sometimes he does come out with stuff that is true, and you can actually go to the bank with his information. A lot of times, it might not be the greatest source of information, but I think it's a great jumping off point here to get into a conversation about Framber Valdez, who right now is the top free agent starting pitcher, and this report that was out there is that the Mets are the favorites to land him. So what he says, he puts out a tweet about Framber Valdez and his place among starting pitchers over the last 5 years. First in wins with 68, fifth in innings pitched, 902 1/3, fourth in ERA, 3.21. Somebody comments on it. I hope that the Mets sign him. They need him. He then quote tweets that comment and says, the Mets are the favorites to sign Framber Valdez. It's expected that they will sign him for 6 years and $200 million. So again, what is this report, if we're going to call it that? It is reporting that the Mets are interested and perceived as the favorites, and there's a contract figure that's out there. How could Hector Gomez get that information? Well, Hector Gomez at times has some sources, of course, within the community of Latin American baseball players. Framber Valdez from the Dominican Republic. There could be a connection to Framber's agent, and maybe that is what he is seeking on the market. Maybe he is seeking a 6-year, $200 million deal. But I want to focus on the contract more in the next segment. Is Framber worth that? We'll go through it. But first, should this be the pitcher that the Mets sign and make their top priority this offseason to bolster that rotation? If you sign a top free agent, one good thing is you don't have to trade for a starting pitcher, and you can preserve some of that prospect capital. The Mets might now be in the market for an outfielder, so if they do want to make one big trade this offseason, maybe it's a trade for a Jarren Duran or a Byron Buxton to complete their outfield, and then they sign a starting pitcher. Maybe they think that the pitchers that are available in free agency are higher impact arms than what's available on the trade market, because if Freddy Peralta is not available, which he might be, and we'll talk about that in the final segment, if Tarek Skubal is not available, then you're talking about Joe Ryan, Sandy Alcantara, maybe Pablo Lopez, Mackenzie Gore, and with those arms, there's a lot of volatility. Mackenzie Gore has been up and down, had a great first half, terrible second half. Pablo Lopez was hurt last year a little bit. Joe Ryan is going to cost an astronomical haul to land him. Sandy Alcantara is coming off a brutal season, a great second half, but largely a brutal season. And the Marlins right now are apparently one of those teams like the A's last year who have to spend The Marlins and the Pirates are both trying to spend to avoid grievances filed by the players union. And so are the Marlins going to take the one real contract on their books and ship it out? I don't know. So with all of that said, when you start to poke holes in the trade market and then you look to the free agent market, who would you like more than Framber Valdez? I've made a case already for Michael King. I think the upside's there. And what I like about Michael King is because he only pitched about half a season this past year, in my mind, he's not going to get a 5-year deal. In my mind, he still is going to want to hit the market again when he's not encumbered by the qualifying offer after a full healthy season where he can get a contract like the one that his teammate or former teammate just got in Dylan Cease. I don't think there's $210 million waiting for Michael King right now, but a year from now, if Michael King puts up a repeat of his 2024 season, and I'm sure he thinks if he's healthy, he will, there could be that $200 million paycheck coming a year from now for King. So that's why I like Michael King, because I think you can get him on a shorter term deal. Zach Gallen is another option on the market, but he had a down year. Ranger Suarez, I don't love, in my eyes, a little bit of a lack of upside. I don't think he's the innings eater that the Mets need. And so because of that, and the fact that he's going to get the 5 years, I think, I'm not as in on Ranger. So once you start to, knock down some of those free agent cases, you look at Tatsuya Imai, that's another pitcher coming from Japan. You have to wonder about how he's going to translate. Is he going to be able to step in and be a frontline guy immediately? Maybe not. And also, I think more people project him to be like a really good number 3 rather than an ace. So then you get to the case for Framber Valdez. Framber Valdez has been the Astros ace, and he's been a good one. Look at what he has done year over year over year. You go back to the 2021 season, makes 22 starts, first time in his career that he actually made over 20 starts at 27 years old, late bloomer. In 134 and 2/3 innings pitched, he had a 3.14 ERA. The next year, he makes 31 starts, gets over 200 innings. It was 201 and a third. Probably the best year of his career, a 2.82 ERA. Follows it up in 2023 with 31 starts, 198 innings pitched, 3.45 ERA. Misses a handful of starts in 2024, still makes 28, still gets up to 176 and a third innings pitched at a 2.91 ERA. And then this past season, makes all 31 starts, 192 innings pitched, a 3.66 ERA. If you are looking for innings, which I would think the Mets are, big check mark for Framber Valdez. If you are looking for run prevention, big check mark for Framber Valdez. If you're looking for a guy that complements this new infield defense you just built by trading for Marcus Semien, how about get the guy that is consistently among the best in Major League Baseball in ground ball rate? This past year, his ground ball rate was 59.4%. If you're almost rolling a ground ball 60% of the time, that is an unbelievable mark, and that is what Framber Valdez does. He has one of the best sinkers in baseball, and with that, he can just attack the strike zone. He's not going to walk a lot of guys. He's going to get his strikeouts, not a ton, but he's still striking out close to a batter per 9. It's been over 8.5 pretty much every single season for the past 4 years. So 8.5 per 9 is a pretty good strikeout rate. He's just a good pitcher. And there was a streak last year, I wonder if I can find this really quick, where the Astros were just winning every single one of Framber starts. Every time Framber took the mound at this point in the season where the Astros started to surge in the standings and get back towards, if not to the top of the AL West after what I believe was a little bit of a shakier start. But Framber, who again started off the year and was just okay, but then he gets on this run. It was his 8th start of the season when it began. Look at the innings pitch. 7 innings pitch, 8 innings pitch, 7 innings pitch, 6 innings pitch, complete game, 7 innings pitch, 5, 6, 7, 6. He's just out there eating innings, doing his thing. There was a run from May 7th all the way through until July 28th, where he did not lose a game until he finally lost a 2-1 game to the Nationals. And actually, I don't even think he lost. He gave up 1 run in a game, and he was not the losing pitcher of that game. His team won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 games in a row when Framber Valdez started, and he earned decisions in, counting here, 4, 7, 8, 9, in 10 of those 13 games. He was 11-4 after that streak. And there was a run there where he actually himself earned a decision and won 6 consecutive starts. The more you look at it, the more you think about it, who is the best pitcher the New York Mets could add for the upcoming season if Tarik Skubal and Freddy Peralta are not available? I actually think the answer probably is Framber Valdez. This guy is, in a lot of ways, exactly what the New York Mets want. But there's a couple of things that you have to put in there as a caveat. For one, how do the Mets view what happened with this catcher? And I think this is why Framber Valdez had to go to the GM meetings this year. He went with his agent, and I think it was just to get him in front of teams and say, all right, explain what happened when you crossed up your catcher seemingly on purpose and drilled him in the chest. What was that about? And who knows what his answer was, and who knows how teams bought into that. But that's one thing that is this little cloud that's hanging over him. The other thing to mention is he has been a little bit of an inconsistent postseason performer. There have been good playoff runs, particularly if you go back to the 2020 season. In the postseason that year, 2014, he set a 1.88 ERA, but in 2021, he made 5 starts, had a 7.78 ERA. 2022, I believe the Astros won the World Series that year. He made 4 starts. He had a 1.44 ERA. 2023 made 3 starts and an ERA of 9. And then 2024, he had 1 start, ERA of 6.23. On Fangraphs, it's tough to find exactly how many earned runs that was. He gave up 3 earned runs in that start and 4 1/3 innings pitched. So he's been in the postseason a lot. He's had a couple of good playoff runs, but I wouldn't call him maybe a great postseason pitcher like I think some might attribute towards him just because you remember, oh man, 2022, he was great. It's been a little bit up and down. This is still a really good pitcher. I think it just comes down to years, contract, and other options that are out there. So we're going to talk about the contract and how else the Mets could spend if it's not on Framber. So just kind of looking if that price tag that Hector Gomez, tweeted out there, is that something the Mets should be in on? We'll go through that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So you put down $5. If it hits, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers. And thank you again for helping us get to 15,000 subscribers on Thanksgiving Day. Really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so the contract that Hector Gomez tweeted out was a 6-year, $200 million deal. Is that fair market value for Framber Valdez? I think it's close. I do my own projections on every single free agent, all the top free agents in the market each year for justbaseball.com. I go through, I have a couple people that work with me on the predictions overall, but we look at and we try to set different contract ranges first and foremost, and then I end up narrowing it down and trying to get to what I think is a fair contract for the player. And then as free agency goes on, we update the predictions and I add free agents onto the list. But we start off with the top 20 free agents in baseball. And Framber Valdez, I believe, came in at number 6, 1 slot behind Dylan Cease. If you look at our contract range that we had on the site, it was $28 to $35 million per season. Shorter term, you're going to get more money on the average annual value. Longer term, that AAV is going to dip down because you're getting a greater total amount of money. If Framber Valdez was able to get a 7-year deal out of somebody, I do think that you'd be looking a lot closer towards that $28 million range. But because he's going into his age 32 season, I really don't think he gets that long of a contract. And I personally predicted he would get a 5-year deal for $160 million, which came out to $32 million per. So if this report was accurate, and this is, let's just call it the asking price for Framber Valdez, maybe not what he signs for, but let's say this is what his agent is floating out there to sign Framber. We want 6 years, $200 million. Somebody's going to meet that price. He's the top starting pitcher on the market, and Dylan Cease just signed for $210 million. The difference was Dylan Cease's contract was over 7 years, and he's a couple years younger, going into his age 30 season, not his age 32 season. So that's where I think it ends up falling back to a 5-year deal. But if it is a 6-year deal, I don't think that him getting $30 million per over 6 years is crazy. I think him getting $33.33 million per over 6 years is a little bit steep when you look at the rest of the starting pitching contracts out there and you compare Framber to some of these guys. Zach Wheeler has the highest AAV right now at $42 million per. I think that was a 3-year extension he signed with the Phillies. Jacob deGrom, $37 million per. Pretty crazy that the two highest paid pitchers in baseball next season, Wheeler, deGrom. How about that? Blake Snell, $36.4 million. Garrett Cole, $36 million. Corbin Burns, $35 million. And then you drop to Dylan Cease at $30 million. Then you have a bunch of guys in that $27 to $28 million range with Garrett Crochet, Tyler Glasnow, Max Fried, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and Carlos Rodon all sitting in between those numbers there. Now, the top free agent starting pitchers last year were Snell and Burns, and they both got over $35 million. But Snell got that over 5 years. Burns got his over 6, and they were, I believe, both younger than Framber. So I don't think they quite get over 35. That's why I think that over 30 but under 35 does make sense. I just stopped short at the 6 years. Honestly, the AAV of $33 million per or $33.33 million per, that's really not bad to me. It's just the 6 years. So if you told me you can get Framber for 5 years at $33 million per, so let's just call it 165 instead of the 160 that I projected, I think that that's fine. It's just a matter of committing a 6th year to Framber that I would be a little bit hesitant on. To me, a 5-year deal is perfect. You're talking about age 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36. Doesn't feel like too long of a contract. And I do understand the value in what Framber brings when it comes to just the sheer workload that he's going to take on. The fact that he has maintained an ERA under 4 for this many consecutive years. And this stuff is not taking back whatsoever. His velocity, it has still been there. He averaged 94 miles per hour on the sinker this past season. He still has a really good curveball, and he mostly works off of those pitches with a good changeup mix in as well. And then he has a slider that he'll occasionally throw in a four seam. He'll also occasionally throw. But most of the time, you are looking at sinker, curveball, changeup. When he faces lefties, it's more just sinker, curveball. Righties get all 3 pitches that are mixed in there. He's a really good arm. I think even if you signed him to the 6-year deal, I'd just be happy that he was part of the Mets rotation in 2026. He wasn't my top free agent target. He wasn't a guy that I was looking at as a clear-cut fit for the Mets because I personally have always felt that it was going to come through trade that the Mets were going to pick up that starting pitcher, whoever it is, assigned to the rotation. I just thought they're probably going to spend on keeping Diaz, filling out that bullpen, re-signing Alonso, and then they will take the prospects and get a starting pitcher. But you can hold on to your prospects, use those prospects to address your roster in a different way, and you can just sign the best starting pitcher that's left on the market. And I do think, again, if you are trying to find the most dependable arm that you can add to this rotation for the upcoming season, it is Framber Valdez. It is. It's a guy that is going to make his starts. He's going to get his ground balls. You have a defense behind him that can really support him, which is key. And he has the postseason experience where he's not going to be phased pitching in a big game. Is he the best option to pitch in a big game? Do I think that if everything was equal and they're both 100% healthy and at their best in October, who would I rather have on the mound for me? Framber Valdez or Michael King? I might take Michael King. I think that the stuff might be a little bit better, but there is something to be said about the guy that's been durable, the guy that is the type of pitcher who should age relatively well when you just consider the fact that he's a lefty with a great sinker, and that typically is going to play for a long amount of time. I don't hate the idea of the Mets being in on Framber whatsoever. I hate the idea. I don't know if I hate the idea, but I don't like the idea of them signing him to a 6-year deal. But if I'm okay with a 5-year deal, then should I lose too much sleep over a 6-year deal when it's not my money and the Mets can always get out of any bad decision they make because they have Steve Cohen? I think that is true where, what's that old saying, right? Who said it? What GM was it? Was it Theo Epstein? I think I'm probably attributing it to somebody else. Chaim Bloom? I don't know. There was some executive that said, if you're realistic with every free agent, you're going to finish third every time. That might be the case here. It might take the 6-year to get it done. And if you believe Framber Valdez is the pitcher that can lead you to an NL East title in 2026 and potentially beyond that, then maybe that's the guy you invest in. I think it's going to be interesting to see how his market develops now that Cease is gone. Is it a quick ramp up where he signs this week, or is that just a Hector Gomez tweet on Thanksgiving that we never even think about again? And then 4 weeks from now, he signs with the Giants or something, and there's never any inkling that he's going to the Mets. I thought it was an interesting enough report or rumor because it allowed us to talk about Framber Valdez, who's one of the top starting pitcher left on the free agent market right now, who clearly would fit the Mets in a couple different ways where it would make sense that they would go after him. I just think if you're going to invest in one contract, one guy is going to get the long-term deal from the New York Mets to be a part of this rotation as you build a young core around him with your top prospects. I don't know if that's the guy that I want to be all in on for the next half decade or even beyond that. Instead, I might want to be looking towards Milwaukee with Freddy Peralta. We're going to talk about the report that's out there that they are not as comfortable with their payroll as maybe they suggested at the beginning of the offseason. So we're going to go through that to close out the show in just a minute. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and a lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description, or you can go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, The Athletic posted a notes column the other day that actually the headline was the Mets. The headline is how the Mets could replace a Nemo-sized outfield hole and more. The second story is about the Brewers to just tell you what the Mets story was about. And this notes column was written by Will Salmon, who does cover the Mets, Ken Rosenthal, who covers all of Major League Baseball, and Katie Wu, who covers the Cardinals. There's some notes about the Cardinals at the end with the Sonny Gray trade, if they're still going to try to move Nolan Arenado. Not really stuff that pertains to the Mets. But when it comes to the section on the Mets, what they're talking about is if the Mets would really dive all in on a corner outfielder in free agency like a Kyle Tucker or a Cody Bellinger. I've already talked about this on the show, how I'm not entirely sold on the idea of the Mets actually splurging and getting into another very long contract with an outfielder when they just got out of one. Part of me thinks that they might prefer to leave that playing time open for their top prospects, and that's sort of what they talk about in this article. Also, they mentioned that they could explore trades, and we've gone through the names there. Jarren Duran, Byron Buxton, guys that only had 3 years of control that are a lot more affordable than what it would take financially to sign a Bellinger or a Tucker. They mentioned in this piece that the Mets could consider stopgaps, high upside stopgaps, whatever that looks like to the Mets in left field or in a corner outfield spot. Regardless, I want to get into the Brewers side of this thing because this is pretty fascinating. So how the Brewers could create payroll flexibility. They mentioned in this story that the Brewers are starting to fret over their payroll because if you look at their projections through Fangraphs, their projected payroll for this upcoming season is $136 million. Now that is not unheard of for the Brewers because in 2022, which I believe was David Stern's last year running the team as the president, they had $138 million payroll. But you look at where they've been the last couple years since then. 2023, the payroll dropped to $126 million. Believe that would probably be, that would have been the final year they had Corbin Burns. They traded Corbin Burns before the 2024 season. But guess maybe they got off of Hader. I'm not even entirely sure where that money disappeared from their books and allowed them to drop $12 million. But then you get to 2024, the payroll dropped to $116 million. That is when they were out of the Corbin Burns business. And then they also were able to drop a bunch of money from Woodruff because Woodruff was hurt. So they non-tendered him and then ended up re-signing him to an affordable deal. Then you had this past season, $123 million was their payroll. So it seems like they're more comfortable in the $120 to $130 million range rather than being beyond that. And if you have a projected payroll of $136 million right now, but you still have some needs on your roster, you don't want to bring back the exact same team that didn't put up much of a fight against the Dodgers, well, then what do? There's a couple of things. One, they can take Brendan Woodruff, who is making $22.025 million, and they can extend him for a lower average annual value. So maybe Brendan Woodruff wants to spend the rest of his career with the Brewers, and they can give him a 4 or 5 year deal. Maybe he takes a team friendly discount. Maybe he takes $18 million per or $16 million per because he wants to stay with the Brewers. He wants more total guaranteed money, and he's willing to take a contract below what his market value could be if he went out, had a good season, and then hit free agency next year. But he is a little bit older. I think he's going into his age 32 or age 33 season. But they can't trade him because he signed a qualifying offer. You can't trade a player who signed the qualifying offer until the middle of the season. So that makes it a little more complicated trying to slash this payroll because there's not a lot of guys that are making a ton of money. It's just Christian Yelich and Brandon Woodruff. And then it is Freddy Peralta at $8 million. You have Andrew Vaughn projected to make $7.8 million through arbitration after a big year. Jackson Churio signed a pre-arb extension. He's going to make $7.25 this upcoming season. Aaron Ashby, we've also signed a pre-arb extension. He's making 5.7. You have your closer, or previously their closer, because they might go with Uribe as their closer now, but Trevor McGill, Tyler McGill's brother, he's making $4.2 million or projected to through arbitration. William Contreras projected to make 11, although I think that is a bargain for one of the best catchers in baseball and probably not a guy that actually is on the move. So you start to go through the names, and the guys that could fetch you the most, that cost the most, quote unquote, is Freddy Peralta and Trevor McGill, or I guess theoretically Aaron Ashby. But Peralta only making $8 million, they can keep him on their books, and they're going to get way more value out of that $8 million financial slot than they could possibly get in any trade. I mean, even if the Mets put together a package of great prospects, are any of the pieces the Mets will give back going to give them the present day value this upcoming season of what Freddy Peralta could provide as their ace? And the answer is no. With that said, could they get 6 years of team control on someone like Brandon Sproat? Could they get a top prospect that can slot into their lineup for 6 seasons, like a Jet Williams or an AJ Ewing or a Ryan Clifford? That's where a trade starts to make sense. I think the Mets could put on the table right now Brandon Sproat and Ryan Clifford and say, here's our trade offer. And I think that that is more than a fair deal. Ryan Clifford could be their first baseman of the future. Andrew Vaughn had a great sort of fever dream of a season once he made it to Milwaukee. He's projected to make a lot of money in arbitration, and he's got only 2 years of control left. So he's not their long-term answer. He's a stopgap, a good one for them if he can keep hitting the way he did at the end of this past season, but an unreliable one as well. And you have Ryan Clifford, who in AAA at the end of this season fared pretty well, very close to big league ready. He can make his way up and be your first baseman of the future on the cheap. And then mid-season, you could get rid of some salary and potentially trade Vaughn if Clifford can actually come up and make that quick of a big league impact. Maybe they don't love Joey Ortiz after a really down season. Maybe they want a better fallback plan. They do have one prospect, and they have Jesus Mate, who is 18, so he's far away, one of the top prospects in baseball. But they have another shortstop prospect that I believe is pretty close. I think it's in double. I think it's Cooper something. Yeah, Cooper Pratt. 21 years old. He is He's actually in AAA. Finished last year in AAA. But Jet Williams has better numbers than Cooper Pratt. Jet Williams is a better prospect than Cooper Pratt. So if you had Jet Williams in the deal instead of Ryan Clifford, that's a guy that can make a big league impact in 2026. He can be your shortstop. He can be not their second baseman because that Bryce Terang. But if Terang went down, he could be your insurance policy there. He could help out in center field or in any of the outfield spots. And Jet Williams is a prototypical Brewers player. Scrappy, hard-nosed ball player, fast, going to steal bases, going to do things well, going to be a Petsky at bat. They love him. Same goes with AJ Ewing. He's another guy that sort of fits a Brewers mold. So the Mets have these position player prospects that I think the Brewers would be all in on, and they can make Brandon Sproat a piece of the trade, giving them a guy that slots into the rotation immediately. The only problem with that is then the Brewers are going to next season where they're hoping to win a World Series with Brandon Woodruff coming off an injury-plagued season, and then a lot of question marks when it comes to young pitchers in the rotation. Jacob Mizorowski has ace stuff, but is he going to put it all together? Who knows? Quinn Priester had a good season, but you don't really feel great about him starting a playoff game. Chad Patrick had a good year, but again, don't really feel confident with him starting a playoff game. And then again, it's Brandon Sproat potentially going over. He's just in that same bucket with all those guys. So it's an interesting one. Long term, it is a good trade for the Brewers to deal Peralta, have those two guys potentially come into it, but they might need some more present day big leaguers that can help them right now in a trade so that they can address more offseason needs while they're shedding salary. Maybe in that instance, I'm trying to think of like what piece fits for them. They don't really have their utility infield spot's not great with Andrew Monasterio. So do they view Acuna as an upgrade? I don't know. It's a weird one. It's a weird one where I think the Brewers, honestly, their best bet to contend this upcoming season, do nothing. If you can't spend, just do nothing. Just keep Freddy Peralta and do nothing. Keep McGill, keep Peralta. Your bullpen's great. Your rotation's good enough when you got Peralta and Woodruff leading it with all the young guys behind them. You have a good lineup. Just do nothing. But if the payroll's too much, again, maybe they make a trade, and the Mets should be all in on Freddy Peralta because you could either extend him with his 1 year left of team control and maybe lock in a little bit of a better deal now than it would take to sign him after this season, or you ride out the 1 year rental, you tag him with a qualifying offer, you still potentially could re-sign him in free agency, but you have all of your spending available in that rotation to make that pursuit to sign Tarek Skubal next offseason. So that's where I'm at with Peralta, but it's just interesting to see that they might be shedding payroll. That does open up some possibilities. The other one, trading for Tyler's brother, Trevor McGill, who has been a very good reliever. He's 32 years old. He's got 2 years of team control left. He could replace Edwin Diaz as your closer or be a high-end setup man. He has saved 51 games over the past 2 seasons. His career ERA is 3.98, but you look at what he's done the last 2 years. 2.49 ERA in 47 innings last season. 2.72 ERA in 46 and a third innings the year prior when he has been in that primary closer role for the Brewers. So another interesting name. Not making a ton of money, but maybe they just want to downgrade that salary slot, get more team control. So a type of trade where maybe you send a Dylan Ross the other way for Trevor McGill. It might take a little bit more than that for a guy that's been a closer, but the point is if they get somebody like a Dylan Ross or a Ryan Lambert who they can envision high leverage upside on and full team control on the cheap, that's the way that you can pick up a reliever in McGill that really could help the Mets. We know there's going to be a good working relationship and a trade there between the Brewers and David Stearns, so you can't rule them out. And the fact that they are potentially looking to shed salary is just something that could stand to benefit the New York Mets. They try to get in on some of their pitchers. So that is the latest update on the rumors going around Major League Baseball. Day after Thanksgiving today, Black Friday shopping. You never know. Things might start to pick up again on the market. I think it's been a pretty quick moving market compared to years past. Just the fact that we've gotten some big signings and some big trades so far. Of course, the Nimmo Simeon trade was huge. The Sonny Gray trade was pretty big. You had Josh Naylor signed super early with a team that he obviously wanted to go back to. And then you had the biggest free agent starting pitcher already off the board. So I think we could be in for a decent amount of movement between now and the winter meetings, and I'll be covering all of it here on Locked On Mets. Probably not going to do a show for Saturday, but if some type of a news item breaks or there's a juicy rumor, you never know if I might decide to pop on. So make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching it on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.